Good evening, everybody. My name is Ricardo. Welcome to Jazz, Joanna, Angelis, Spiritist Society. It's my pleasure and happiness being here. Um, I'm going to share with you a family recipe. It's the most wanted recipe in the world. It's been my family for many years. It was brought by my older brother, Jesus. And the recipe is for happiness. It's a recipe for happiness. Who wants to learn the recipe? Yeah. So this is how we're gonna structure this learning moment. Basically, we're gonna first look at the ingredients that's brought by current scientific point of view, and then we're gonna see a story from Jesus in the home, where Jesus taught us this recipe, and then we're gonna look at the story in the both perspectives, in the individual happiness and then the world peace. And finally, we're gonna cook a mini cupcake of happiness in the end, practicing what we learned tonight. So before jumping to any content, I would like to invite you all practice this inner review. It's always good to start anything you're going to start a project, start a year, a new job, or even a small task, start a day. Also think with the goals in mind. And so for the learning of this session, we're going to ask ourselves this question: what is your idea of happiness internally? So I want to make two disclaimers. First is, whenever we are practicing meditation, we are persons, and we have personas, we have our ego. So sometimes our ego will try to challenge us and be rebellious, not letting us to get the true answer, or sometimes it will give a very pretty answer, but that's not what we really feel. So we have to go deep and ask permission to ourselves, accept our ego, because it's part of our journey. We carry our ego, we still will carry for a long time. But through acceptance and love, then we go deeper and we ask ourselves in essence. And the second one is just for any person who have mediumship. Whenever we practice meditation in the Spiritist Center, just be careful. Don't. It's not opportunity. It's not time for the spirits to communicate. It's for you be the center. You be the master of your soul. So if you're in doubt, just keep your eyes open. And this is a very short exercise. So basically, I suggest if you want to look at this waterfall. And just imagine the calmness it's bringing to you. And if you want to close your eyes, feel free to close your eyes and focus on your breathing. You might want to cross your arms and legs so you feel more comfortable. So take a deep breath. As you listen to your breath and to the sounds of the environment and my voice, you take another deep breath. And then you can ask yourself in essence, what is your idea of happiness? Very good. And I may want to go deeper and ask yourself, what would make you personally truly happy? Okay, very good. Now just can come back and we state of present. One more time, open your eyes. I'm here again, Ricardo. Very good. Does anybody wants to share anonymously any words so we can see from the group who we perceive it the same way? Happiness, calmness. Very good. I feel like for me, maybe one word that would be perfect now would be acceptance. Anybody else? Okay. To be in peace. Okay. So now we have our goal in minds. Each one have did your inner exercise. I hope it worked. If it didn't work, just practice more at home. Maybe take a longer time to relax. You need some practice to be able to just disconnect from the problems or from noises. Now let's go to the recipe. So first start with the ingredients, scientific point of view. About 30 to 40 years ago, science decided to study happiness. And then new area of psychology came, this positive psychology. Have anybody heard of that? Positive psychology, neurosciences. And they have found some results, and they've been sharing with us. And I talked a while ago, I talked about this movie that I think is a good reference, at least to get started. The movie is Happy. And the movie refers to many of the researchers, like from University of California, University of Berkeley, and others. And there is a lot of books out there. Here are just a few examples. Can you guys see? Last one is The Art of Happiness. And there are very many interesting findings of that. So I'm going to just share some of them. I recommend you to go and watch this movie. It's available on Netflix, and I believe in other sources too. It's about 1 hour and a half, I believe. And from there, you can go online and you can look in research for positive psychology. Basically, I want to share just some basic things here. So first here, the hedonic treadmill and the set level of happiness. So what they're telling us through the research is that we have, each one of us, we have our own set level of happiness. It's kind of like our baseline for happiness. And as life events happen, like good stuff happens or bad stuff happens, we may change. Maybe we feel happy for a while, but then we tend to go back to our level. In general, this level is positive for most of us. And basically, what they're finding is that the life events, they even study, like, compare people who won the lottery and people who had a severe car accident. After 2 years, their level of happiness goes back to their level. So if you're positive, you tend to go back to, after a negative event, you tend to go back and learn something from it and take a good perspective. And if you're negative, the opposite will happen. And the idea of hedonic treadmill, we can imagine like, so this was developed first by Rousseau, a philosopher and educator. And the idea, later, more recently, the scientists, they started to develop theories and they have come to conclusions. So the idea is like, as if you are on a treadmill and you're looking for happiness, and the happiness is always in a goal, like an exterior goal. And as you achieve that goal, then you want something else. So a very material example could be, I want to get a car. And then when you get a car, no, I want to get a nicer car. And you get a nicer car, no, I want a house. No, I want a bigger house. So you always wanting something that's outside, and you never get really happy. You just have those little bursts of happiness, of satisfaction, but then you're getting satisfied again. And related to that research, they found that there are some elements that can have an impact on our happiness, and starting by our genes. So what they say is that the set level that we talked about, the previous, for this, our set level of happiness is 50% in average, determined by our genetic material. So just a small spiritist observation to that is that in Spiritism we study and we believe that God is perfect, God is Almighty, He knows everything, and He's fair. So it wouldn't be fair if you were given more happy body or less happy body, if you know what I mean in terms of the genes. But as a spiritist, we can look at it, well, there is reincarnation. So if I develop the happiness skill in my past lives, I'm already gonna, perhaps in the moment of the conception or the moment of the choice of the body, I'm gonna attract the exact body that's according to my level of evolution. So back to science. So if we have 50%, nowadays we have no control. We're not aware of a way to change the genes yet. And then what is the rest? So most of us, we live in a materialistic world and we tend to see things from the materialistic point of view. We would think that life events, like the circumstances, a car crash, winning the lottery, or getting a job promotion, or our wealth, everything that's related to our life circumstances, we would think that has a strong impact. But the research, the evidence is showing the opposite. That only counts for 10% of the set level of happiness. So for those who missed it, we'll talk about set level of happiness is when you usually are and we can be swinging up and down depending on life events. And so that gives us the rest 40% that's based on intentional actions. And then, again, this is some scientific research that's shown in the documentary Happy, 2011. And they even go and give some example of intentional actions that help us with happiness that they were able to measure and compare, and they have some results. So one of that is keeping the flow. So people who are always doing something new, people who are outdoors, who are doing exercise, who is close to nature, they tend to have a higher level of happiness. And the same thing when you have people who set goals for their lives and they track their goals, and they really want to achieve those goals, internal goals more specifically, they also have tend to be happier than people who don't do that. And like here, our very smart goal setter, and he's achieving his goal. And this is very important, people who develop meaningful relationships, being family, being friends. It's been found by science that it is very important for our level of happiness to develop meaningful relationships. So if you don't, doesn't mean you have to have 30 friends, but the friends that you already have, work on that, develop that friendship, be closer to your friends or to your family. Whoever it makes you feel good, you can give and receive. And also, as they're doing research, they're finding that a lot of the most impactful actions we can take in terms of happiness are related to our feelings. And so people who contribute, who do something for the community, for nature, something with a higher sense of purpose, they tend to be happier. This could be in spiritual groups or religious groups, but not necessarily. And they have found that we are naturally more leaning towards cooperation rather than competition, and we tend to be happier when we are in a cooperative environment rather than competitive environment. And finally, of those internal feelings, they also talk about gratitude, how gratitude helps. If you practice very simple exercise of gratitude, like every Sunday you go and say 5 things I'm grateful for, that tends to increase your level of happiness. And they found that development of compassion, it tends to be one of the most impactful ones. They even have an example of a guy that he was a banker, a very rich guy in France, and he went to India and he decided to stay there and be just helping poor people. And you can see in his eyes how he's happy doing that. So he gave up his previous life that was very materialistic, hedonistic, and he's a happier person just helping each other, serving water for people who are almost dying, people who were rescued. And so this is the end of the first part, which we talk about the ingredients for happiness. So recapping for people who came later, we are studying here the recipe for happiness. Thank you. So I get to drink my water. And we look at the ingredients in terms of what science is telling us nowadays in terms of happiness. And science is very important for our lives. We rely a lot on the science discoveries like medicine and technology. However, science has to be slow because you need to do a very good investigation to get into conclusions and to be able to say this is the truth. You have to work on that. But God doesn't let us wait for science to find responses only, especially for things related to our happiness. So God has sent us many messengers who had developed this knowledge already and came to teach us. And we have this main master, Jesus Christ. And in the book, Jesus in the Home, chapter 19, there's the recipe for happiness. And basically, have you guys seen this book, Jesus in the Home? Portuguese, Jesus no Lar. Basically, it's by Spirit Neo Lúcio, Chico Xavier's meeting. And basically, Jesus, every night, he would reunite with the disciples and their families at Peter's house, Simon Peter. And he would talk about the gospel, elevated conversation. And as the master, he was teaching the disciples about the gospel, about the divine laws, about the recipe for happiness. And we are also invited to do the same if we can do every night, at least once a week. We have even a group that can help if you don't do that yet, practice the gospel at home. It's basically a moment that you stop and you study with the master, so you can grab a book like this one and read the teachings from Jesus and reflect upon, and helps to make to your inner reform. And so in the story, we have here some parts of the story just to summarize. So basically, Thaddeus, one of the disciples, he was discussing about the problems of the world, how the conquerors, the Romans, and the rabbis of Sanhedrin, they were the cause of the discord and of the suffering. And after he is finishing his arguments, then Jesus asks him, Thaddeus, what is your idea of happiness? So we asked this question earlier. For those who weren't here, you may want to ask yourself. And then he was got by surprise and he replied, Lord, happiness is peace for all. And then Jesus looked with him with meaningful face and replied again, I understand that, but what I want to know is what would make you personally truly happy? So if you remember the exercise that we did, sometimes when we ask ourselves questions, we come with a beautiful answer or a pre-prepared answer. But then when we go deeper, we realize that, well, what really will make me happy? I'm sure if one of us wants the peace in the world, but that's not what we're really looking for. We're not there yet. We want that, but we want other things first. And then he was more sincere, and he talks about he wants to be understood by his family and friends. He doesn't want to be judged. He likes to be accepted and be welcome and to be valued, to be respected. And this is a summary in short. What he was saying is, I would like to be understood, respected, and held in esteem by others. And this is most of the chapter, is he explaining what he's looking for, and that's the summary. And then once he finished, everybody was looking at Jesus like expecting he would come with a very long speech. And Jesus looked at him with the crystal clear eyes. And he says, Thaddeus, if you desire happiness from the entire world, do unto others as if you'd have them do unto you. If everyone would follow that rule, it would very quickly spread the glories of heaven across the earth. And that's how the lesson ends. So basically, my interpretation is that the recipe of happiness starts with the context of our life, because we are at a specific point. So each one of us, we have our own journey. So we have to start from the point, each individual point, because there's multiple journey in parallel. And on that point that we are in the journey of our happiness. And then from that point, we ask ourselves, what is my idea of happiness in this point, on this journey? And then I go deep and ask, but what would personally make me truly happy? And then we apply the answer that we get into do unto others as if I would have them. And this is the teaching of the Christ, the Master of humankind, as if you'd have them do unto you. And then the last part is if one would follow that rule, we would very quickly spread the glories of heaven across the earth. And basically that's the two parts that we're going to talk about. The first one, the individual happiness, and then the world peace. So the individual happiness, when Jesus says, if you desire happiness from the entire world, do unto others as if you'd have them do unto you. So I wanted to, little maybe reflection of the divine laws that are present in this sentence, based on this context. So I'm going to start with the first one. It's the law of charity. Do unto others as if you would have them do unto you. And in the Gospel according to Spiritism, on the Spirit's book, the third book, this is the last of the laws, and it's together with other two laws. You guys remember? Law of love, justice, and charity. So Allan Kardec put together those three laws, love, justice, and charity, because they're very interconnected. So law of love, to love God above all, and the neighbor as yourself, is very connected to the law of charity. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And then law of justice, when we think about justice, we think about our rights and duties. And the Spirit's books, the Spirit's replied to Allan Kardec that what is our quintessential right? We're created simple ignorance, and we have a destiny, an alloy happiness, the pure happiness, plain happiness through perfection. And we have a journey to achieve that. So this is our right. And because this is only for us, that we have this right only for us in this room, is it only for Spiritists? No. Only for Christians? So everyone, every spirit in the universe has the same right. That's the law of equality. Now, to achieve that right, we have some duties. And now comparing to Thaddeus, and this is very similar because we are like Thaddeus, like we are the learners. And that is, in the beginning of the story, he wanted to be understood. He wanted to be respected. But the problem of the way he's setting his goals is, for me to be understood by others, be loved and respected by others, I need the others to cooperate in my happiness, right? They have to want, because there's another law, the law of freedom, the free will. So if they don't want to respect me, or maybe they want, but they don't know, or they're not thinking about that, then how he can achieve his happiness? So that comes that for our right to achieve happiness comes also our duty to achieve happiness, because nobody else can do it for us. And since God loves us and gave us this right to being happy, and we are the only one who can make ourselves happy, then it becomes a duty to. And so back to the story, and I put some of the laws that we mentioned: law of charity, responsibility, because I'm responsible for my happiness, which is very tied to law of cause and effect. And we saw for science the examples of how we can create new causes to bring us the effect of happiness. And then there's the law of progress, because as we evolve, we might choose to be stationary. We have free will. We might not want to follow the recipe. We might just want to be more lazy, not evolve. And then we make bad choices, and through the repetition of the bad choices, they become bad habits. So how can the law of progress that's inside of us in our conscious can help us to see that we are the wrong pathway? So then comes the mechanism of projections. So I want to tell a story of Sunny and Shadow. And I like that Katie opened the page by chance and talks about light and shadow.
By chance?
By chance, because I had another text to read here, but the book stayed at home. We couldn't find a copy here. So there was two dogs. They were friends, Sunny and Shadow. And they were walking out of the neighborhood, and they saw there was an abandoned house up the hill. And they didn't want to see, oh, what's going on over there? Let's take a look. But then Shadow, oh, I'm busy right now. I can't go now. So you go first, and I'll go back later. So Light went there. Sunny went there, and he was like in a very good attitude. He's like, oh, I think I'm going to make new friends today. And as he entered the abandoned house, he's looking around, and he sees another friendly dog. And then he smiled at the dog, and the dog smiled back at him. And then he waved hi, and the dog waved hi back at him. And then he left the house, and he saw another dogs following him, and they also friendly faces. He waved at them, they waved him back. And then he left. He was like, oh, that's a nice place. I think I'm going to make good friends here. I need to find Shadow, tell him. But then he didn't find Shadow. And later, Shadow visited the house. And he was kind of like not a very calm dog. He was worried, and he was afraid of getting hurt. So he was like, I don't know if this is a good idea. I think there's something bad waiting for me. And as he entered there, he saw a suspicious dog. And then he showed his teeth, and the dog showed his teeth back at him. And then he barked at him, and the dog barked at him. And then he ran, and the dog ran after him. And as he's running, he's barking, running. He's seeing all the dogs barking, running. He leaves the house. Oh my God, this is very scary place. Never going back there. I gotta tell Sunny about that. And that's the end of the story. So what happened? How can two dogs go visit a house, the same house, abandoned house, and have this different experience? It was a mirror house. So they were interacting with their projections. And that's, I want to bring this reflection to us, that we are all the time interacting with our projections. So when we go to a place, to a party, we tend to see how we perceive the world. And Joanna de Angelis, in the book Jesus and the Gospel to the Light, I would say profound psychology. We don't have a translation of the book yet. On a specific story when Jesus, remember when they cast the stone, they were planning to cast a stone on the woman who was caught into adultery. There was also a man in adultery. They were not casting stone on the man. And Jesus said, the one who doesn't have a sin, throw the first rock. And actually, those Pharisees who were ready to throw the rock, they had committed the same sin. They were all adulterers. And so Joanna de Angelis, when talking about that, she said it was apparently easier to attack the projection of the image hated in somebody else, rather than identifying it inside of us and overcoming it. So the gospel is, for us, is the workbook for us to develop the kingdom of heaven in our heart, through the works in our emotion. And so now back to our friend Thaddeus, I give you some time, somebody's still looking. He wanted to be understood. He wanted to be loved, to be accepted, to be valued, to be respected. And as we discussed, through the free will of others, I cannot control the others. So how can I get my happiness if I'm expecting that? And then comes if you apply the law of progress in terms of the projections, if I'm looking to be understood, perhaps because I'm not really understanding myself. I'm not really accepting myself because I'm looking for the acceptance of the others. I'm not loving myself. I'm not respecting myself. And then goes the inner reform as we start to look inside of us and reflect. And that's a very good clue. Whoever is practicing inner reform, just look at what are the things that bugs you, and then start to ask questions. How can that be applied into me? If I put myself as the responsible of whatever I'm feeling right now, or whatever I don't have, how can I make me happier in terms of identifying my internal needs? And so I think this is a good reflection for the first part, the do unto others. Because if you become like Thaddeus, start to practice respect, love, acceptance, understanding to others and to ourselves, is that we start to break the vicious cycle that we were talking about earlier and transform into a virtual cycle. Because when I understand myself, then it makes me easy to understand you. When I understand you, when I respect you, it makes it easy to respect myself, because the law of equality, we are all equals. And now the part of the world peace. It's not the goal of the night. So the second part of the answer is, if everyone would follow that rule, we would very quickly spread the glories of heaven across the earth. If you remember, those who had chance to look in the Gospel according to Spiritism or the Spiritist book, Allan Kardec classified the worlds into different categories. We don't need to go into that deep, especially because of the time. But basically, we can think like Jesus is here in the celestial. He's a pure spirit. He has achieved the perfection, so he's living the unalloyed happiness. In primitive world, we could think like maybe Earth in the beginning, the first incarnations of people, and we are here right now. So we're in the test atonements where the wrongdoings still prevails, and we are trying to go to regeneration, which is a transition from the blessed world, where then the good prevails. And so I want to practice an exercise. So let's imagine that there was another planet close to Earth, they're very Earth-like, and we wanted that to be the happy world, to be a model for Earth. So which people, based on Thaddeus' wants to be understood, to be loved and respect, which people should be living in this world? Let's say that we have a way to transport people there, and we have a very good immigration system. There's no way to bypass the system. So which people should be going to this world for that to be a happy world, based on Thaddeus' words where he wants to be understood, loved, and respected? People who understand, who love, and respect, right? So those would be the people who live there. Because if any of us who don't practice that yet start to go there, if we went there, then we would be affecting each other's happiness. And so that would be the model of the world. And I believe that would be the world that we want to transform Earth into, the blessed world, where happiness prevails. It's not the pure and perfect happiness as in the celestial, but the one that we can achieve, because perfection still has a long journey to get there. Now, on the other side, if we sent all the people who practice the recipe of our happiness and we're living there, what would be the name of Earth? So that's the happy world. So Earth would be the unhappy world, because and even to nowadays, even if we didn't talk about if we still have these people here, if they are a minority, we still have a lot of unhappiness. Now, but let's say that they moved there and we stayed here because we don't practice this with discipline, love, respect, understanding, acceptance, etc. So how could we transform Earth in the happy world? How? Based on this context of acceptance, love, and respect.
Start loving yourself.
Stop loving yourself. So how can that change the world? Because you're changing yourself. Maybe you're going to be happier, right? Maybe you become happier. But how about the others?
Well, it's gonna be a mirror. I'm gonna be a mirror for them. They're gonna look at me.
They're going to be inspired.
Yes.
Is there any other way to
Um,
transform Earth into a
you can
happy
give
world?
the example about others.
Yeah, that's what Michi said.
Yeah.
So I'm saying, now I'm asking, is there any other way that we can transform Earth?
Any other way?
Yeah, there's no other
It
way.
starts with no.
There's no other way. And so now,
That's a trick question. No, there's no.
so then we can practice this, and eventually through many lives, we're going to influence each other, even in this life, and so on and so forth. But there's the free will. There will be those who still don't want to practice that. They don't care. They don't want to be happy, or they don't believe, or they just. So, and then this is a topic for another discussion. But that's what happened to Capella, if you heard of that. If you didn't hear, I can talk to you about that later. And that's what's happening to Earth. So Earth is also going through the transition phase. And those who are given, some of the spirits are given the last chance to remain in the planets. And if they don't take the chance, that's why we've seen so many crazy stuff happening out there, because we are getting our last chance. So now the masks are being uncovered. The opportunities of doing good are coming for everyone. And those who will stay will inherit the Earth. So finally, and this is an example, you can look more about that on the book, On the Way to the Light. Talk about the Egyptians that were expelled from the planet Capella, and etc. So finally, for our practicing the recipe for happiness, as our lecture is ending, I brought this story. I think it's a very touching story. The example of Jesus in his last words. If you think about Jesus, he was a spirit from the celestial world, incarnated in the tri-spacious planets. He was constantly in flow. He would not stop. He was working all the time for the good of the others. So he had a higher sense of purpose and contribution. And he built his team, and he developed very meaningful relationship with his team. Like we were looking at the ingredients of happiness in science. Every act of his life was an act of gratitude. He was always connected with God and thankful for everything that God gave us. And every act of his life was an act of compassion. So we can understand, we cannot understand, we can just imagine how happy he was. And we can feel a little bit when we connect to him, we can feel a little bit, a tiny little spark of his happiness. And even though that, so he most likely he had the good genes because he was already a perfect spirit. So 50% plus his 40%. Now his life events were kind of like the opposite. He was working hard. He was very poor in the last 3 years of his life. He was betrayed by his friend. He was abandoned by his other friends and the closer ones. Abandoned by the people that he saved, that he helped. He was disrespected. He was violated. He was wrongfully judged. He was physically hurt, morally hurt, and he was put into death on the cross. And yet, in his last words, he says, "Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they are doing." So what I want to ask for all of us to do during the pastime is to reflect into these words and reflect that we have the seeds of happiness, and forgiveness is a very important seed of happiness, and connect to these words of Jesus and try to think about somebody related to you, or think about yourself. You want to forgive. So I want to forgive myself because of something, or I want to forgive somebody. And then practice this exercise. And as you can connect to these words and you can connect to these internal seeds of happiness, you will develop happiness. And science says that when we practice meditation, we can actually change our brain. So the area that we have compassion on our brain, as we practice just compassion through meditation, or it doesn't have to be meditation, but if you practice compassion, we can change our brain. So thank you all. I wish for all of you a wonderful, happy life, for me too. And we're going to be transitioning to our pastime now. And try to use this exercise even when you're getting a passe or when we're doing the final prayer or at home tonight. And that's the cooking the mini cupcake of it.